Yeah, I'm just really looking for a lot of help right now.
Hey, listen, don't worry about it, man. I got you, bro. I got you.
I got you. Trust me.
You can trust me. I got your back.
Look, trust me, man. I got you.
Don't worry. I got you.
Confía en mí, todo va a estar bien.
Hey, before I jump in today, I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. We hope you feel celebrated today. We felt like there was no better way to celebrate than with street corn and cornhole. And we just thought about dads. That's what came to our mind. And so we're going for it. So after this service, there's going to be all that stuff going on out on the plaza. But I do just want to acknowledge all of the fathers, the grandfathers, the foster dads, the stepdads, the male mentors that are here today. Our lives would not be what they are without you. And it is tough. The greatest thing that ever happened to my relationship with my dad was me becoming a dad and being like, man, this is hard. I really gave you a harder time than you deserved. And he was like, yeah, you did. And so I just want to say thank you. If you are a dad, granddad, father figure in this room, would you just stand so we can honor you this morning? Give a hand for all these men who consistently put in the work and do a tough job. We're thankful for you. Buy a mistake later. It is, I think the love language of most men is meats. And so, today we're going to continue on in this series that we started at the beginning of the month called Trust Issues. And we're talking about this idea of like, man, everybody has issues with trust at some level. Where do these things come from? What do we do with them? How do we navigate them? Because trust really is sort of the bedrock of life, of relationships, of all the things that we want. And yet most of us have been wounded. And so how do we sort of move through what we've been through to get to a better place? And so we're going to continue down that path today. And I want to encourage you to take some notes, write down some things that jump out at you, take pictures of the slides, whatever works for you. But the goal is that you would take something away today that you can have a conversation about, that you can sort of self-reflect on, and maybe even have a conversation with your family about, and get some insight into what it would mean to sort of move forward in your life as you walk out of here today. And the title of my message today is Broken Axles and Broken Hearts. Broken Axles and Broken Hearts. And one thing you should know about me is I love going out to eat. Anybody just love going out to eat? It's just a delight. I love it, especially if they've got like free bread or free chips on the table when you get there. It just makes it just unlimited carbs, just makes it nice out the gate. And I also love unlimited refills. That, I think, is my love language. Just the Diet Cokes just keep coming. You ever get the waitress that is just like, I brought you an extra because you're going through them so quick. And you're like, I'm going to have something a little extra in this for you later. You know me. And she's like, we've been warned by your family before you came in here. But one of the things I love most about going out to eat with other people is that you're sitting around a table with other people, and especially if you're going out to eat with people that you haven't seen in a minute, or it's been a while and you're going out to eat to catch up, oftentimes my family will be sitting around with other people and we're all laughing and talking and sharing stories, and usually someone will share a story that reminds someone of a similar story on that topic, and then they'll share their story, and then it'll just start getting passed around the room. Like somebody will tell a funny story about one aspect of their life, like the weirdest thing that happened to them in college, and then it'll just start going around the room. Or like some crazy thing that happened when they were a kid, or the worst time they got in trouble, and it'll start going around the room. But what I've noticed is, in the midst of all this, every once in a while, you'll hit a certain topic that everyone else, when they get asked this question, it seems like a lighthearted, fun party atmosphere question, but not for them. Like maybe when this question goes out, they sort of get quiet. It's almost like part of them shuts down in that moment, and they seem like they don't want to share. It's almost like there's this whole other thing happening in their head that you're not privy to. And you could tell this is a tender issue. And maybe if you're like me and some of the people that are around me, there's some people that are like really sensitive to that. And there are other people who don't know how to read a room. And so they're like, hey, what's your story? And they're like, nah, I'm good. And they're like, no, come on. And you can tell this person is like hiding some hidden hurt about this subject matter. And someone's just pushing them. And you're like, would you stop it? You know, because you don't know what's going on with this person and they don't want to like bring it to the surface. But you get this sense that whatever story is attached to this subject goes deep for them. That something took place that for them is something that has a lot to do with who they are today, maybe in ways that they don't want to talk about, they don't want to explore, that they've really tried to keep in the past and really get over and overcome. And this is usually the point in the dinner party where most of us are like, let's change the subject, right? We're like, who wants dessert? Cherry's Jubilee, anybody? You know, and we just try and push the meal forward so that we don't have to stay in this weird moment. But even though that person doesn't want to talk about it, whatever it is something that everyone who's present with them can feel. Because we have this ability as people to sense each other's stories, even if we don't know what they are. We have this ability to sort of understand when there's a wall that's gone up between someone else and us, and the atmosphere, the temperature in the room changes, the connection between us changes, and we all have these walls. And in fact, some of us, we have big memories of running headfirst into somebody else's walls and suddenly realizing they were there. And there's a reason for this, because we do this because your ability to trust in the present hinges upon your willingness to address the pain from your past. And I think there are certain things that most of us don't want to look back on, don't want to trudge up, don't want to go to, because it just feels uncomfortable. We're like, I don't want to go there. It's just going to make me sad. Why do we need to talk about that? I'm trying to move on by ignoring it. I'm sure that'll work. Plus, I'm not even sure it's really affecting me anymore. And everyone around you is like, it is. It really is. You're the only one who thinks that. Think about it this way. Let's say that you were in a car accident, okay? Don't freak out. Everybody was okay. But the car, not great, okay? Let's say in this car accident, you bent the axle of your car. And so it's not drivable. And you're like, okay, I don't have the money to fix it. I'm just going to park it for now. Fortunately for you, you have two cars. And so you're like, I'm just going to drive this other car. And you were driving this other car for a while, but as your family's growing, and if your kids are anything like mine, they have a million different things they need to do in different areas. And you're like, we need two cars. And so you have this bright idea. It's been a year, and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to go back and drive that other car. And somebody who's really smart in your family is like, didn't you break the axle on that car? And your response is, yeah, but that was a really long time ago, okay? That was in the past, okay? I'm sure the car has gotten over it by now, okay? And in fact, I don't even believe that it is right to blame your current car problems on past car accidents, okay? I think that's a bunch of phooey, all right? And so I don't buy it. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to get in that car, and it is still not going to drive. No matter what you believe about the past, no matter when that thing got broken on that vehicle, the way things work is what's damaged stays broken until it's repaired. And this is true for broken axles and broken hearts. And some of us don't want to believe that our past has a way of bleeding into our present and reshaping, redefining, rescaffolding our future. But the reality is, until we address our issues, we'll continue to copy and paste them onto every relationship, sabotaging our future and extending our suffering to everyone in our orbit. If we are unable to trust truly trustworthy people, the issue isn't with them, it's in us. So what do we do about that? I have no idea. Let's eat some elote. Let's close in prayer. Lord, I love just stirring things up and then sending you guys out for more carbs and sugar. There's actually this story in the New Testament that I think talks around about this idea in ways that are very helpful to us today. And it's a weird story, so you know we're going to have to read it together. And it's found in Luke chapter 8, verse 22. And this is about a ministry trip that Jesus takes with his disciples. It says this, one day Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. And so they got into a boat. And when they arrived, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet them. For a long time, he'd been homeless and naked, living in the tombs outside the town. His demons had often taken control of him. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he broke them and rushed into the wilderness completely under the demon's power. Wow. There's so much to unpack here. First off, what an amazing first impression, right? The disciples have never been here before. Jesus is like, let's go across the lake. You guys want to see what's over there? And they're like, this sounds like a fun adventure. And they get there, and the first thing they see is an angry, naked man yelling at them, which reminds me of the first time I went to Riverside. You know what I mean? Just fond memories. And also how I met Pastor Ozzy. That is a different story that you guys can ask him about on the plaza later. But this is a crazy scene, right? No matter how you slice it. In fact, I like to do this sometimes. I'm always interested in how artists interpret these moments. And if you Google this story, this is one of the first images that comes up from this, is this. And I love this for so many reasons. First of all, it looks a little bit like Tom Hanks from Castaway. You know what I mean? Except that he's like, you know, like that's this artist's idea of crazy, right? And then the other thing I love is the guy who's behind him. Look at his eye line. He is looking at this guy's naked butt. That is what is happening. And he's just like, I don't know what he's doing beneath the rocks, but he's just like, listen, I can't even focus on my work because of that guy. This is crazy. And this is the first thing that they encounter when they enter into this new place that they've never been. It describes this guy as being possessed by demons. And I know maybe that feels a little bit uncomfortable for some of you. But I would also say that probably your idea of what a demon is or is like has been more shaped by horror films than by the Bible itself, right? In fact, many scholars have different definitions for demons. Some Bible scholars would say that like a demon is a dark spiritual entity. And others might refer to a demon as a self-destructive pattern, like a compulsion that you can't seem to let go of that's driven from something in your past. In other words, like we imagine, I guess, that demons look like this, okay? But in reality, they may as well just look like this, okay? And some of you are like, sweet, delicious demons. Oh my gosh. Just salty, fatty demons. Oh, what are we doing later? Either way, however you define this, what we know is this guy's demons have come to define him, right? They've shaped everything that he has done for so long that nobody, including him, is really clear on where the demons end and he begins. And this is what can happen with certain like patterns or compulsions or obsessions or addictions or oppressions in our life, is that we can get so caught up in them and we can repeat them so much that we don't recognize them as something different than us. That is who we have become, even though that's not who we're made to be. And what I always wonder when I read this story is, okay, we know how he is, but how did he get that way? Like, what happened to him? Something must have happened. But what was it? Sometimes I think when we encounter people that confuse us, we don't ask this question. I think sometimes we don't want to ask this question because the reality of it is it's easy to be angry or annoyed at the way a person is if you don't know how they got that way. You ever been so frustrated by somebody and then you hear a little bit of their backstory and you're like, oh, yeah, you're actually doing pretty good. You know what I mean? Because of what they've been through. Like you can't imagine having survived that thing and what it would have done to you on the other side. And we do know, according to the story, that this guy terrorized this town. But here's the thing that I think we don't really think about. He's also from this town. He's from here. He grew up with and around these people. What happened to him? Was he abused or abandoned in this village? Did somebody beat him? At some point, he must have had like friends or family. Where are these people? They're nowhere to be found. Nobody's trying to help him. Nobody's trying to reach out to him. Nobody's a part of his life anymore. All we know is that he doesn't trust anyone. And he lives alone, terrorized by his own loneliness. And I think that some of us are lonely for the same reasons, right? We've got our demons as well. We've got the things that we can't shake or break away from that affect our ability to trust and interact with other people as well. I mean, you're probably not running around a cemetery at night naked, terrorizing old people, but you've got your stuff, okay? If you are doing that, please come to the prayer corner after service, okay? We definitely want to talk to you, pray with you, maybe give you some pants, whatever the Lord leads us. But what is your stuff, right? Like, what is it that you wrestle with? What is it that's below the surface? What happened to you? And how has that shaped who you've become? I wonder if it might be one of these things. Research has shown us that really, with most humans, there are 4 core trust issues that drive a lot of our behavior when we have trouble relating to other people. And I want to just sort of overview these things for you, and you can listen in and see if you see yourself here. Some of you are going to think, like, when I start talking through these, you're going to be like, you're talking about me. And I just want you to know up front, I am, okay? But I'm also talking about other people too, because this is like a common thing that a lot of us share. But the first core trust issue is the fear of depending on others. The fear of depending on others. And how this happens is when someone couldn't count on the adults in their life to understand them, provide for them, and care for them at a young age, they learn that, like, I've got to take care of myself. If anything is going to happen in life, I've got to do it by myself, for myself. Because you've learned that depending on other people always ends in heartbreak. It ends in disappointment and disillusionment and sometimes abandonment. And after a while, people with this fear, they actually stop voicing their own needs because they're like, what's the point? Now, they do still hold other people accountable for meeting those needs that aren't voiced, which is nice and fun. And when those people around you don't guess what your needs are properly and respond according to the way that they should, which is almost always, you think like, see, I knew it. You can't count on anyone. And the people in your orbit are like, what is happening right now, okay? I don't even know like what I didn't do that I was supposed to do that you're mad about. And our response to them is, well, if you really cared, you'd already know. And so what happens is you find yourself looking for and blowing up any imperfection about the other person to justify pushing them away to protect yourself from having to get too close or trusting anyone too much because it feels dangerous to you and you believe you can only trust yourself. It got real quiet, and that's number 1, okay? We got 3 more to go, and some of you are like, I'm in trouble. Just realizing there's some demons in my life. The second one is this, the fear of being controlled. The fear of being controlled. And these people often grew up in authoritative environments where every decision was sort of made for them. And they felt like, man, you can't say no and you can't ask why without being guilted or punished, maybe even sometimes with violence. And so now, whenever somebody asks you for help or to make a sacrifice for them, you assume it is obviously malicious. It's an attempt for them to take advantage of you or manipulate you or control you. And you're like, I'm not falling for that. It may not have anything to do with what they're really doing, but this sabotages you because the reality of it is every healthy, successful relationship requires both people to make compromises and sacrifices for one another. But in your mind, a relationship is not 2 people sharing and serving one another. It's a competition with a winner and a loser, a leader and a follower, the one in control and the one being controlled. And the thought that you have is like, man, if I'm in control, then that means I can't be controlled, and that feels safe. Sure, I like you. I want to be in your life, but only on my terms. We do it my way or no way. If you want to do it with me, you do it my way or you do it by yourself, because I don't compromise. As predicted, it got even quieter after number 2. Number 3, the fear of being imperfect. The fear of being imperfect. People who grew up being constantly criticized or, on the opposing end, overly adored, can come to believe that they can't do anything wrong or that they can't do anything right. One extreme or the other. And what both of these people learn is that connection requires perfection. And it leads us to think like, man, if you knew the real me and all the ways I don't get it right, you wouldn't want me. Which is why I got to keep up the act, which is exhausting because it feels like I am always on the verge of being exposed for who I really am, which isn't somebody worth loving. You feel like everyone is secretly judging you even when they're not? Probably because most of the time you are brutally judging yourself. Because you think like, I got to catch it before they do, because criticism and acceptance can't coexist. Which is why any critique that you receive feels like a full-on personal attack. Because everybody knows like you either get things right and they love you, or you screw it up and they don't even want to be near you. And not only do we expect ourselves to be perfect, but we expect the people around us to be perfect too. Our bar for everybody is so impossibly high, which keeps us from having to trust anyone, because real people are messy and inconsistent. And I refuse to put up with that. Which oftentimes leaves us alone. And then the fourth one is the fear of reliving our trauma. Like when all of us, when we suffer abuse or abandonment, the pain of it can be so jarring and overwhelming that we don't know how to deal with it. And so what a lot of us do is imagine that like your heart or your soul has sort of these different levels, and we sort of open the door to the basement of our soul and we cram all that pain from our past and we just sort of shut the door and just hope that somehow over time it just disappears and goes away. But that incident imprints on us. And we begin to believe that our bad experiences that happen to us, they're not one-offs. They're permanent patterns that dictate how life is always going to work for us. And the issue is when any future relationship gets close enough to where it starts to require us to trust, it's almost like the door to that basement gets kicked wide open and all of the fear of reliving those past traumatic experiences surfaces, and we become afraid that like, oh man, no, this time is gonna be just like the last time. I knew it. I can't do that again. And so we panic and we push the other person away. Now, we would never call it that. We would never say like, oh, I'm pushing them away. We would say, I was just testing them. Of course, we don't tell them the parameters of the test or even that it's a test or what's secretly at stake, because we need that other person to prove to us that they can blindly come through for us. And most of the time they fail the test, but on the rare occasion that they pass the test, it's really only because you didn't make the test hard enough. And so what you do then is you construct another test and another set of hoops and another set of hurdles that they have to jump over and jump through to prove to you that they actually care about you. And most of us repeat this until we kill the relationship. Unfortunately, we end up driving the other person away by creating the exact circumstances that we fear most. And the people that we tirelessly test, they either end up walking away from us because they can't do it, or they give in and they just do the thing that we've been accusing them of doing because they're getting blamed for it either way, so they might as well. Now, these are the four most common trust issues or personal demons that we all face. Most of us have one or two. Some of us have had the privilege of collecting all four, as if it were like a set of action figures. Maybe yours isn't even on this list because there are many more, but like whatever it is, it haunts you. and it comes out of you at some of the most inconvenient relational moments. And I think this is why James, the brother of Jesus, gives us this really good pastoral advice. James chapter 1, verse 19, he says, understand this, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And I think part of the reason he tells us this is because if you read James, this whole book, he's very drawn into the way that we treat each other, especially people that are different from us, and realizing that this person is not the same person who hurt you before. He understands that if we react in the moment when our trust issues are initially triggered, often what we're responding to is the fear from our past experiences, not the current situation itself. And so James is like, slow down, take a deep breath, sit in that moment and admit to yourself that maybe some of what bothers you about their issue is actually in you. That it's not them at all. That maybe they have done something that let you down or dashed an expectation or broke your trust, but the reason it pushes such a button is because of something inside of yourself. And many of us hide our issues until that button gets pushed and it springs forward, but others of us, like the guy in this story, are completely dominated by them. We hate it, but we feel stuck. We don't know what to do about it. And in this story, it can be inspiring and frustrating because what Jesus does for this man is he heals him instantly and frees him of his demons. And this guy is incredibly grateful. And he's just like, man, Jesus, my whole life I dedicate to you. I want to follow you. I want to go everywhere you go. I want to do everything that you invite me to do. Just take me with you. And Jesus doesn't do that. In fact, it says this. Verse 38, it says, Jesus sent him home, saying, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. Not what he wanted to hear. In my mind, I imagine, if I'm this guy, I imagine him pushing back. Jesus, you don't understand. These people don't like me. Have you heard any of the stories of the things I did? Of the things that happened between us? We have a history. I've hurt them, they hurt me. They don't listen to me. They're not going to believe me. And I'll be real with you, Jesus. They're the reasons I have issues in the first place. But what Jesus understands is true healing comes from aligning our actions with who we want to be, not who we used to be. Which means that living at peace in the present requires us to make peace with the people in our past. And this, I think, is the hardest part of healing from our trust issues. I think it's interesting that this guy has an interaction with God in human form who heals him, and the very next thing that Jesus says to him is that's step one. Now there's something else for you to do. You need to go back to that town. You need to have some conversations with some people. And he's like, man, I don't want to do that. And I get it. I think it's highly probable that somebody in that town, or maybe even a group of people, did something unspeakable to this man that made him into what he became. And those instances and the fact that nobody stuck up for him and nobody fought for him and nobody looked out for him caused him to live the way he lived, untethered from people and reality for years at a time. And then God does a miracle in his life and now he's just supposed to go back. This gets even more intense because the Greek word that Jesus uses here to say go tell these people is actually this word that means to relay fully, which means Jesus isn't talking about a quick conversation. Hey, shoot him a text real quick. Jesus healed me, LOL. You know what I mean? Sorry for those weird times. Sorry for the time I killed your dog. You know what I mean? It's not one exchange and then he's done. Like, it's going to take more than a single interaction, and it always does. When you're trying to patch up your past, it always takes time, energy, effort, trudging through things that you don't even want to deal with anymore. But I got to tell you, just like this guy, if you want people to believe you've changed, you can't just tell them once, you've got to show them often. This has to do with the track record that trust requires, right? Because people are just like, yeah, you say you've changed, but I'm watching your life. I'll let you know when you've changed because I'm watching your behavior. I'm not listening to your words. And Jesus tells this man to go back into this town and to invest himself in demonstrating to these people that he's been changed by Jesus, that he doesn't allow his past trust issues to shape the way that he interacts in future relationships. And I think too, Jesus is also trying to give this guy's community a chance to actually demonstrate to him that they've changed, that they can be different, that they can have a new kind of relationship. He wants to give the community a chance to make amends with this man. I wonder how many of the people in this community carried around the guilt of what they'd done to him that made him who he became. And yet they felt like they could never talk about it. And Jesus says, the healing that I brought to you is not just for you, it's for everyone you're connected to. And I got to tell you, the same thing is true in your life. If you have a relationship with Jesus, the healing that God is gifting to you is not just for you, it's for every single person you're connected to. Which is why there's always, when Jesus does a miracle that changes and rearranges somebody's life, the next step is always like, go and demonstrate and communicate what I've done. It sounds simple, but I think it probably would have been the hardest thing this guy had ever done. Think about how hard it would be for you to go and make amends with the people who you hurt because they hurt you first. It's not a small ask. And some of us would have no idea even how to arc the steps of that. And if you're one of those people, you need to come back next week because I'm going to spell it out in 1, 2, 3s. But in the meantime, I'll tell you about something that happened to me. When I was about 7 years into being a pastor, I had a meltdown. And it was bad. I blew up in a meeting. I was working at a church. I blew up in a meeting. I cursed out the people I was working with, and I stormed out of the building. And I'm not proud of it. It's terribly embarrassing. And the person I was working for probably should have fired me. But instead, he was very gracious. And he came to my house and said, hey, it's obvious you're going through something. This can't happen again. And you need to figure out where it came from. And that's what landed me in a therapist office. So I'm sitting in this little room with this guy who was really tiny, and he had this huge sweater on. And we were talking for a while, and he said, the feeling you had, if you go back to that moment, the feeling you had in that moment where you lost it, where have you felt that before? Which is a great question to ask yourself when you're being triggered. And after some soul searching, it brought me back to this moment in my early 20s where right out of Bible school, I interned with this pastor that I had a close relationship with. I really trusted in a lot of ways. And a few years into serving underneath him, it came out that he was having an affair with an underage girl. And it crushed me. And that traumatic experience taught me man, you cannot trust authority because they are all liars and hypocrites. But here's the reality. All leaders aren't liars and hypocrites. That guy was a liar and a hypocrite in that moment. But it didn't matter to me because what I learned from that experience, I sort of internalized, I pushed down into the basement of my soul, and I just sort of projected it onto every leader that I served after that. Until one day I was sitting in my office, I was reading my Bible and praying, and I felt like God was you need to write him a letter. And I was like, no. And I didn't want to, but I ended up, he was maybe you don't have to send it, just write it. And so I was okay, we can make that deal. And I wrote this letter that was like, essentially, you really hurt me. And I know you said you're sorry, and I know that you served your time. There's prison time involved. And I know that you have, tried to make amends, and I know you've been through rehab, and I know that you have tried to move past it, but I'm not over it. It damaged my life in ways that's still impacting me, and I need to let it go. Because I'm smart enough to know intellectually that's not who you are anymore. And it's definitely not who the people that I'm surrounded with now are, but I keep treating them as if they are, and I need to stop. I wrote in the letter about some things that he invested in my life that actually did grow me. This is really hard for us to understand, that people can be light and dark. It's very confusing for us to understand the duplicity and duality of people, and yet it lives in us too. And what was crazy about this is I went and God was like, okay, now that you've written it, you might as well just send it. And I was like, I knew you were going to do that. And so I went and mailed the letter, and it was like the sort of thing, as soon as it left my fingertips, it goes down into that little thing, and then it's gone, and then right then I was like, nah, I need to get it back. You know what I mean? I wanted to take it back instantly, and I was calling friends. I was like, I need a blowtorch. I need, how strong are your saws? But honestly, once it was out of my hands, something about it was healing. It didn't matter if he got it or read it or responded to it, because I let go of it. And yet, even though I experienced a level of healing then, I still have to remind myself at times when my stomach gets sick because I have this premonition about somebody in authority over me, and I want to distrust them, and I want to believe they're up to something, and I have no evidence whatsoever, but I can't make the feeling go away. It's in these moments where even still I have to remind myself, they're not him. It makes me think of this verse in the New Testament, book of Philippians chapter 3, verse 13. And the author says this: I have a long way to go, but I let go of what's behind, and I struggle for what's ahead, which is the new life that God offers me because of what Jesus has done. And the way this is actually written is really in the the present tense, but ongoing. And so it's really not I let go of, it's I'm letting go of. I'm letting go of. I let go of it, and then when it comes up again, I let go again. And when it comes up again, I remind myself I'm not living in the past. This person is not that person. These circumstances are not those circumstances. I don't want to allow the pain from my past to sabotage the future that God wants to give me. They hurt me then. They don't get to keep hurting me because I refuse to release it. Let it go. I think what this verse is saying is that you can break free from your past, but you can't do it by yourself. You need Jesus to do this, but it's worth it. And this is the homework I want to give you today, is this: to ask yourself when you leave here, what unresolved issue from my past makes me suspicious of trustworthy people in the present? And what would I need to do to stop unjustly projecting old pain onto new people? I'll tell you, if you actually take this seriously and do the inner work of it and discuss it with the people of your life and invite Jesus into this process, it will be a pivotal turning point in your life and in your relationships. And here's what I fully believe that God wants to do for you, what he did for this guy, that he wants to miraculously heal you and free you from your demons. And at the same time, he's going to have another step. He's going to say, now you need to go and you need to work out that healing. You need to demonstrate that healing. You need to exercise that healing by doing what I'm asking you to do. And you're always going to have the same feeling that some of the most spiritual people who ever lived, who wrote scripture had, I have not arrived. I'm not there yet. I'll tell you what I am doing though. I'm letting go. I'm letting go of this because what God has for me, the new life he has for me, the new person he's designed me to be, the new relationships he's pulling me into, the new legacy he wants me to leave for my family is worth the difficulty of having to let that go and stop bleeding into the present, because I want my future to be what God envisioned for me, not what I am most afraid of. I think this is what God wants for you more than anything during this series. And I want to close our time together by just praying that God will do the work he needs to in your life so that you can truly be free. Would you bow your heads across this room? God, I know your love for us is insurmountable. God, every single person in this room has been hurt, has been let down, has been disappointed. Maybe they've been betrayed, they've been heartbroken. And each of these things have formed us in certain ways, some of us more than others. And yet there's really no comparing pain. The things that landed heavy on our soul shaped us in a very specific way. And God, today, as you are approaching us like the man on this shore, you want to invite us to move towards the freedom that you have for us. And God, I pray that you would open our eyes to the ways we're projecting old pain on new people. I pray that you would help us to heal and let go. That you would help us because of the way that you give us chance after chance after chance to reprove that we are trustworthy. God, I pray that we would do the work to show others that we are different and to give them a chance to prove that they're different. And God, that we would invite you into the process, and no matter what anyone does to us, that we would gain our hope and our security, that we would gain our stability and our confidence from you, and that would change the way we interact with everyone else. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.